All right, welcome everyone to today's webinar titled Out of Alphabet Soup and Into Compliance. I want to thank everyone for joining us today, and we appreciate the time you're going to be spending with us. We tend to keep a pretty tight webinar here at Nlyte. We try to keep it under 30 minutes, so we tend to move pretty quickly, and we have a lot of great content to provide, and we have some great presenters today. Wanted to also tell you, we'll be sending you a recording of this webinar after the webinar, so you don't have to jot down notes or draw diagrams of what you see or take screenshots. We'll be sending the slides. Additionally, if you have any questions, feel free to submit them in the chat box, and we will try to get to all the questions at the end of the webinar. So again, thanks for joining us. And today we're fortunate in that we have two co-presenters with me. My name is Mark Gatos. I'm CMO of Nlyte Software. But today we have Gary Paquette, who is from the office of the CTO at Nlyte Software. Gary has 25 years of infrastructure management experience. He's quite a veteran, and he's in a variety of active standards committees. He has active participation. He's participated in 3 compliance projects for 3 different Fortune 500 companies. So he has deep knowledge and expertise in the world of compliance. So thanks for joining us, Gary. And additionally, we have Matthew joining us today. And Matthew has spent 10 years really defining and implementing IT operational SLAs or service level agreements. So again, deep expertise. He's managed ISO 20000 certification projects and has ongoing experience with his previous employer. He is a certified ISO 20000 practitioner and an ISO 20000 auditor. He's designed and implemented measures to meet a variety of SOX IT controls and provided evidence of compliance for ongoing SOX audits. So again, we have 2 veterans with a lot of deep experience, hands-on, real-world experience on the end user side for compliance. So again, I want to thank you, gentlemen, for joining us today. For those who don't know Nlyte Software, I'll just give a quick introduction to Nlyte Software. Nlyte Software was founded in 2004. We have a global presence throughout the world. We have customers in virtually every region. We are the recognized leader in data center infrastructure management. But really what we do is we help organizations sort of optimize and automate how they manage their computing infrastructure, right? And we help with discovery, with workflow management, reporting, throughout the entire technology stack. And the goal is really to help companies reduce costs, improve efficiency, increase transparency, but it's additionally to reduce risk and to prove compliance. And so today we're going to be focusing on the compliance element. And we've got TAM solutions, we have DSIM solutions, we've got a great discovery product and software asset management, but inevitably we are not a island unto ourselves. Typically we're tying into other systems. We're tying into ITSM systems like ServiceNow, BMC, HP, Cherwell, or we're tying into VMS systems, or we're tying into business intelligence systems. So typically organizations start with our solution, but then they take those systems and they tie them into other systems. And so take the data and they tie it into other systems so that others can get the value of that information. So as you can see here, here's just a partial list of some of the clients we have throughout the world. We have over 350 global customers across a wide variety of industries. We're very proud of our 98% customer retention rate. With customers, we take customer satisfaction very seriously. We are a dedicated software company. We don't have a hardware agenda. We're not trying to sell hardware or push a hardware agenda. We are hardware agnostic. We're on the 10th generation of our product. We support small firms from 25 racks in a single data room to we have organizations as large as 150,000 racks using our solution. So again, we pride ourselves on our customer satisfaction, that we're easy to do business with. We have global partners, and we have a complete solution. Today, we're going to be focusing on really how we can help organizations with compliance and how they approach it and sort of the challenges of compliance. And as I sort of mentioned before, I sort of alluded to, there's a lot on this slide. The key thing is data. And data is at the core of the Nlyte solution. The solution is built around managing data, keeping data current, and that's a big part of compliance, right? So whether you're doing data center infrastructure management or you're tying that into ITSM systems to do data center service management, or you want asset integrity and compliance, where you're discovering assets, or you're doing analytics around that data, or you're just doing straight up computing infrastructure management around your physical and cloud resources, data is at the center of what Nlyte does. And we take that data, we capture it, we normalize it, we can push it into other systems, as I mentioned before, whether it's ITSM, BMS, we can tie into the virtual layer, we can tie down into BMS. Again, the core of the solution is data, and a big part of compliance is really about data. So enough about Nlyte, let's talk about compliance. And so, Gary, why don't you take us through this first slide and talk a little bit about compliance at a high level?
Thanks, Mark. One of the things that most people have a challenge with in regards to compliance is getting access to multiple systems to pull information together and be able to provide the information that they need in the audit or for the compliance report. So some of the challenges they have is they have spreadsheets, you'll see Post-its, a whole bunch of systems that can interact with each other. So the importance of all of this is being able to collect all of the information in a central repository where we can pull data sources, as Mark was saying, pull data sources from various places, validate that data, match that to the infrastructure information from the technology side, make sure the data is current from how old is the information, and then match that up from an accountability perspective to the other systems and produce these discrepancy reports and information. Now, typically it's a real painful process in being able to do this for most organizations, and what we've done from the Nlyte side is centralize that information and a click of buttons instead of having to spend weeks and months trying to collect this information and making heads or tails out of it. We'll take care of tracing it, accounting for it, taking a look at the discrepancies, where you have potential issues from a security perspective, what you have from a software side, and also validate from your change management process what is working and what is not working. That's going to help you better your environment and your methodology moving forward.
So Gary, let me jump in here. So when we're talking, compliance means a lot of things to a lot of different folks. When we're talking about clients, what are we really referring to as it relates to computing infrastructure?
Often what we're looking for is the fact that you might have a difference between what you're reporting from a financial perspective to what is actually in the infrastructure. In other words, equipment has been retired, things have changed or grown organically, and nobody's went through the change management process. We never see that, right? So we want to be able to take a look at that information, and so you've got the various compliance regulatory boards and regulations that you have to follow. What we want to be able to do is simplify that into standard reports where you can click and get into it. That goes all the way down to your software. We know that there's a BSA as an example. We'll come in and say, listen, we were here from a software compliance audit perspective, and it could be from a specific vendor, and they have the rights to walk into your organization. So that's one of the examples, or some of the examples from that perspective.
Thanks, Gary.
From the regulatory side, as you can see, there's so many regulations, and based on the analyst right now, we're at the tip of the iceberg. We've seen HIPPA for a while, Sarbanes-Oxley for publicly traded companies. Government agencies are actually have their own implementation of SOX or Sarbanes-Oxley. GDPR now is in place, and what we're seeing is more and more regulations around the chaos of technology. It's one of the fields within the world right now that is growing exponentially. and it's the area also with the least amount of regulations today. So because of all the security breaches, all the way down to Reddit yesterday that published the fact that they got broken into, the food chain restaurants got broken into and lost all their credit card to the hackers, and they were able to track that down. So it's gotten to the point that we had systems and compliance for paper trails and paper documentation. Now it's how you manage that in the digital world. So if you can get involved today, you will be solving tomorrow's problems.
Hey, so let's get Matthew in here because I'd love to get some feedback from him. So Matthew, as an IT service manager, what were your experiences and the challenges that organizations had in really getting and staying compliant with whatever the given regulations, the government regulations or their own corporate regulations? Like, what were, in your mind, the challenges that organizations faced?
Well, the single biggest challenge to implementing any kind of these compliant legislative or regulatory systems really is getting appropriate management commitment, because not only do we need to assign resources and the right kind of resources to the projects that are going to do this, but we've also got to evangelize and drive the change in our processes, in our record keeping, in our security policies through the organization as a whole. And you're going to have staff who are saying, I've got more important things to do. Why does this matter to me? This is going to take too much time and effort away from my regular job, which is important. This is a waste of time. This is a bureaucratic nightmare. All the kind of stuff that we typically expect to hear. And so management's commitment to demonstrate that the importance of meeting either the standards, in terms of the ISO 20000, 27001 security certification, or, with legislative requirements like GDPR and Sarbanes-Oxley, is that management has to show sufficient and appropriate willingness to the organization that this is important to the organization, because you're going to be impacting your organization, the people in your organization and their lives and their regular working activities. Now, in some situations, it may be that adopting a standard is nothing more than, a checkbox exercise, a marketing exercise. Look, fantastic, we've got a seal on our, on our web page. But with all of these, the reasoning behind them, the thought that's gone into these standards and the various legislation, is that there is a positive benefit if you're prepared to drive change into your organization, and you really actually go looking for the value that can be provided by these certifications. So if you want to get that value out of it, you've got to have the appropriate commitment from the top to be able to drive that through and get your people to understand and buy into the whole process.
I guess you have to have that executive level to make sure everybody understands they need to participate.
Absolutely, and it's it's indicative of things like, rather than who the people you're assigning to the project, you need your drivers, your big guns, that kind of thing, so that people realize how important this is to the organization and to themselves.
Yeah, and on the next slide, I think it's pretty easy to motivate sort of the executive level. I think a lot of executives are kept up by these type of headlines, right? Equifax massive 2017 breach, which it turns out being that they needed to update a particular piece of firmware on Apache Struts, I believe it was, right? Or this one in the Houston Chronicle. I mean, like Gary said, there's literally one happening certainly every week, but it seems like almost every day you hear about breaches. So compliance is a pretty important topic, so it's pretty easy to get executive buy-in. Gary, anything you want to add on this slide? Gary, you there?
Yes. Sorry. What I was saying is a lot of people say that orange is the new black, but I know most people don't look that good in orange. And a lot of the regulatory side, like Sarbanes-Oxley, are looking for prime cases right now to make examples out of. So if you're doing mergers and acquisitions, you're a prime candidate for the BSA and Sarbanes-Oxley, especially if you're a publicly traded company. The BSA is monitoring it. They did 460 audits last year, and what they do is, software licenses don't necessarily transfer over to the new company. That's a process that you have to put into place and report it. So you need to know all of these pieces of information. Then the public humiliation. I mean, the city of Denver went through a public trial on TV where they had software compliance issues, other companies from the Sarbanes-Oxley side, and we're going to start seeing that more and more as GDPR and other regulations come about.
Great.
As far as,
did you want to talk about chain of custody?
Yeah, the chain of custody, basically what we're trying to do is help in the methodology and process. One of the things that we always explain during our webinars and our presentations is where do you start and how do you get to your end goal? And everybody has to be involved in this. Organizations like to put their, I always see the head in the sand type scenario. If I don't hear anything, it's not an issue. But you have to actually take a look at what's going on within your organization. And now these days, you can be personally liable, even though you work for an organization, for what's happening from a compliance perspective or from an audit perspective. So, from a chain of command, you want to make sure that who has access to what. You want to be able to track what you have within your infrastructure. We often take a look at companies when we walk in and do our discovery and inventory as an example, and find subnets, complete subnets that the networking people or the infrastructure people don't know exist. And then from the accountability side, how do you group all that information together and put it into something that is easy to understand and manage? Most people just don't know how to get started, and that's what we bring to the table, is the 80% process and 20% technology. But that 20% technology, which is the data that you were talking about at the beginning, Mark, is crucial to how that 80% is going to take place.
Okay, great. Next slide.
On the alert side, one of the things we want to be able to provide you with is when we discover things that don't match a standard image or a standard configuration, so a discrepancy based on configuration or devices that are not supposed to be in your infrastructure, finding torrents within your organization as an example, or finding devices that we can get in with the default password or agreed community strings. We want to be able to alert you on these direct aspects of this. So basically, the capability of, as we're processing information within the system and we're analyzing it internally as we're putting it into the database, we want to be able to let somebody know at the same time. So sending an alert out or creating an incident ticket where a workflow will kick in and now helps you lighten your load, but guarantee or help guarantee that compliance perspective from the security side. So, it's from the software side, it's from the physical device side, how the configuration looks like. We go into organizations, they say, we're not using default this or default that, and then we end up finding these things within your organization, and that kind of raises, everybody's eyebrows at the same time. Those are the things from the security perspective that a lot of these compliance like GDPR and SOX and everything else, that's what they're trying to get to. They're trying to let you know that you need to manage security. You cannot manage what you don't know about. It's nice to say that I think I have these many servers and these many workstations or these many this, but unless you really know, you can't lock it down, you can't secure it, and you can't control it. So that's what we're trying to wrap our hands around here at this point.
Yeah. So I have a question. In a way, I'm going back. I'll ask two questions on the slide. So Matthew, I want to ask you a question. We were talking earlier about sort of showing the chain of custody regarding compliance. Like in your previous role, how did organizations show the sort of show that chain of custody in their whole compliance process, which is obviously very relevant to security? But what was your sort of experience?
Well, I think really it's a case of, as Gary said right from the start, you need to start capturing the information now, both about what's in your infrastructure and the work that your people are doing. Because without that, without starting now, you have no baseline to work from. And likewise, should it come to an audit or certification or something like that, you're not in a position to be able to say, we can track each change to our infrastructure. So really, it's a case of you want to start capturing those records. Records can be everything from meeting minutes, documentation of your processes, right down to randomly selected change records from your ITSM system, or scans, of your infrastructure and what's available. And you need to be able to capture that, now build a baseline, analyze what's there, and then start tracking changes to it. And in terms of accountability and traceability, you also need to be able to explain the negative. You need to be able to say, I know that all my staff follow my change management process, but how can I prove it? How can I prove that no changes exist outside of that process?
And so I guess you're doing this from a reporting perspective. And how frequently would you say folks were typically being asked to generate this type of information?
Well, it varies according to which standards you're complying with and which legislative requirements. Certainly for ISO 20000, you're looking at every 6 months. But to be honest, if you're looking to get the value that these systems generate, you should be doing minor scale audits, probably on a monthly basis. Your change board should be looking for rogue changes. Your problem management board should be looking to ensure that fixes are driven into your infrastructure across the board, and you should be looking to track everything as you go.
Okay, great. Thanks, Matthew. And Gary, on the topics of security, right? Obviously, security is a broad topic. We hear about it from a variety of different angles. But when it comes to compliance, what should people think front of mind? What is the thing they should absolutely focus on when it comes to security and compliance?
One of the biggest aspects is actually, as I was saying before, is knowing what you have. It amazes me how many organizations have absolutely no clue. They might have great information about the data center and very little information or poor information about the desktop or the rest of that environment. Examples: network printers. There's hard drives on them. When you transfer things via USB stick, now those documents are on those network printers. A lot of them are actually leased or rented. That means they go back. That information's on those hard drives and ends up in somebody else's hands. So when we wrap all of this together, we're taking a look at, from the security side, on what your onboarding processes are, all the way down to the disposal process. So you want to make sure that everything in between that is captured, you have knowledge of, is changing within your environment. We even have, as an example, missing in action reports. That should raise a security alert. We were dealing with a large auto manufacturer that they said 10% of their assets were missing on a regular basis. Now, when you have 100,000 assets, that's 10,000 devices. Is it ending up at a competitor? So not only do you have compliance issues, but then you have, what can it impact on your business from a competitor side of the house too? So understanding all of those aspects and putting that into one repository, one system that's doing these analytics for you, is going to help you in that world.
Great, thanks.
And when it comes to detailed record keeping, it's one of those things where, you go into these organizations and you see these massive filing cabinets where, when they used to do it on paper, they keep that information alive, then they'd store it, put it into archive, etc. Now in the digital world, we're starting to see more and more issues with currency of data. And what we mean with currency of data is, how old is that information? So if you're using a barcode reader and you're running around with the team, barcoding information, that's great. It's nice, because as you finish that area and you move on to the next one, somebody might have added, you might add something right after you've walked out into a room. So automating this process and letting it happen electronically or in conjunction with other processes, which is fine too, is keeping that data fresh. You want an evergreen type of solution where that information is being updated, the configurations are being updated, what's being installed is being updated, and keeping that in one repository. Now, if you have it in one system, when we're doing the analytics and storing that data for you inside the Nlyte systems, we're guaranteeing the consistency of data. So regardless if it's a switch or a router, a virtual machine, a physical machine, a controller, we're keeping it in one central location that you can report off of. We normalize the data for you, and we're validating all of what's happening at the same time, putting in those checks and balances for you, just like if it was like an accounting system. Don't forget, technology asset management is the technology side of what finance is doing. And so you're getting your checks and balances along the way. So the record keeping and keeping the data fresh and accurate is one of the biggest problems that we can help from a value proposition.
Okay. Well, so I want to go back to Matthew. Matthew, so obviously chain of custody is one aspect of record keeping, which we were talking about. But what else is important to an organization in the world of record keeping for compliance?
I think Gary's addressed quite a few of the really important points in terms of the currency of the data and the freshness of it. I think also what's really important is the ability to actually find relevant data. We all live in organizations, we no longer keep everything in a filing cabinet. It's now stored across an organization in various formats. It's in your IT service management system. It's in your, various documentation and guides and things like that. And that presents a fairly unique challenge in how do we manage all of this data. And I know there are lots of vendors out there who are going to promise you, fuzzy searching and being able to, navigate across all your file servers and pull out data from all your Word documents and things like that. But I would say really what you're looking to do is actually be able to manage and track that in an appropriate place, and a tool set that can keep all of that together for you. The other thing I'd also say what's really important is being able to, again, come at the problem from the other side. So we're looking to secure our organizations, and we're looking to deliver the best service that that we can, and so we're adopting appropriate processes and procedures and controls. But we also need to say, how do we know that things are outside of those controls? And so having a canary in the mine, an alarming system, something like that can alert you and say, we have an unauthorized change to the user table of a financial management system. Having that come back and being able to then validate that against an approved change record gives you the confidence that you've locked and bolted the doors.
Okay, great. Well, Gary, we've been talking about compliance on a generic level. Why don't you tell us about Nlyte's approach to handling compliance and how we sort of help customers implement and manage their compliance initiatives?
Yes, great point, Mark. One of the things that we don't want to be is a burden within somebody's organization. And the solution should be able to do the work for you and not add extra workload once it gets configured. So a lot of the design goals behind the solution sets that we have at Nlyte, allows us to be able to do that. As an example, the discovery and inventory technology is agentless. So we are actually walking your network and discovering everything along the way within your infrastructure. So basically, we're protocol agnostic. It doesn't make any difference what the device is. One will always find it. So from the discovery side, and then from the inventory side, it'll be based on the instrumentation on those specific technologies. We'll collect as much information as we can so you understand what you're getting, and we'll normalize that data for you. What we end up establishing for the first time for a lot of organizations is documenting everything within that infrastructure. So that establishes your technology asset baseline. Once you've established that baseline, now you start seeing everything that's happening from the change management side, linking that to the service management side, linking it to your ERP or financial systems, linking it to HR systems. Wouldn't it be great on an exit interview or as a move, add, or change, knowing what that infrastructure looks like? So we end up being the single source of truth, as we put it onto this slide, where we have all and captured all the information for you. And linking things together and normalizing that data for you, where you have these discrepancy reports and or comprehensive reports also around the other business systems, your back office systems, and automating that for you helps you understand what that infrastructure looks like. And that's what Nlyte brings to the table. Not only, you know, we are a partner with the customer in being able to provide the value and the solutions to them. So, you know, we have, as you can see with the panel here and the rest of the organization, we have great people that can help you. We understand the issues and the problems, and we are here to help solve them.
Okay, great. Well, that's some great information. We're actually over time, but we've gotten a variety of questions. As I said, we will get to all questions irrespective of whether we get to them here or offline. So if you have any questions, feel free to submit them. But we've had a few, so let me sort of jump right in here. We have a question from Jan Ping, who asks, based on your past experience, are most organizations ready for compliance audit? Gary, did you want to take that one?
Sure, that's a great question. I would say the majority, in the 90% mark, are not ready to be able to do that. It's always a scrambling exercise. It's a pointing finger event. And so because of the way IT has grown, the dependency on technology has grown with the IoT now into the mix, where anybody can connect anything these days. Most organizations are not in the position to be able to go through an audit without some level of sweat equity having to be put into it.
Okay, as you would sort of expect, right?
Yeah.
And then Tammy asks, in your experience, is compliance seen as a benefit or a burden to an organization?
And that's a really good question. I mean, most people see it initially as a burden, but if you think about it, once you've sorted out what you have, it could be one of the best things that ever happened to most organizations. This is where you see where there's waste, where there's misorganization, where you can improve within your environment. If you are willing to accept that you have a challenge in front of you and get in front of it, normally you end up saving money along the way. You end up saving humiliation in the press. All of these aspects are taken care of, but more importantly, now you've got an understanding of what you have and putting controls around them.
Okay, great. And we have a ton of questions coming in. I don't think we're going to get to all of them. As I said, we guarantee we'll get back to everyone individually on your questions, but we are over time. So we'll take one more question from Ishmael. And the question is, are companies really at personal liability? Who is at personal liability for compliance in an organization?
Typically, what we are seeing right now, what the compliance people want is they're going to the head of the company. We've seen it in other organizations where the C-level people are the first ones that are going to be on the list. You'll also see the finance department be held accountable. We see cases over and over again where, from a compliance perspective or regulatory perspective, where the court cases will bring down all the way down to, it could be even the sales side. Because don't forget, knowledge of something not being correct is enough for them to prosecute. So basically, everybody involved, anybody who knows that there's an issue or a problem, has personal liability into this, especially if they do know that there is an issue.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've seen organizations not want to know because they know there are issues, but they don't want to be liable. So it's definitely an intriguing, the idea of liability is sort of an interesting thing. Well, as I said, we sort of run out of time. We have a ton of questions we didn't get to. I'm sorry we didn't get to them all, but we will, as I said, get to everyone offline. There are a lot of great resources on Nlyte. If you go to Nlyte, on the top bar, you'll see we have a resources pull down, a lot of information from data sheets, briefs, and videos on the topic. Urge you folks to see those. I'd like to thank Gary and Matthew for participating in today's webinar. It was great having you guys as industry experts joining us, so thanks. And I want to thank everyone for joining us on today's webinar, and we look forward to seeing you on the next webinar. Thanks, and have a great day.